so we can get the second part of our evening moving very quickly. We have two candidates, both replacing Delegate Kirk Cox. We have Katie Sponsler, and we have Mike Cherry this evening. Katie is going to go first for opening statements. She will also get the first question, and she will also be the first person to talk in closing statements. So welcome everyone, welcome Katie and Mike. And Katie, thanks for being here, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Katie Sponsler, and I'm the Democratic nominee for the 66th District in Virginia's House of Delegates. First off, I'd like to thank you all for being here and engaging actively with the electoral process, and to thank the Richmond Chamber for hosting us and allowing us the opportunity. I am a veteran of the United States Air Force, a former park ranger with the National Park Service, and a mother to 2 children on the autism spectrum. Beyond that, I'm the 5th of 7 children, born and raised in Youngstown, Ohio by a union auto worker and a church secretary. I am also a gun violence survivor that at the age of 19, as a waitress, was struck by a bullet during an armed robbery. I am someone who understands the barriers and the challenges that we face. And I think that it's important that those voices are elevated within the legislature, because I think it gives us good laws that reflect those. Because those barriers and those challenges, they are not unique to me. They are very common in my district. They are very common in our Commonwealth. There are so many individuals that have had to fight twice as hard. And I think it's important that we have that voice within the legislature, elevating those issues and making sure that those individuals are represented too. I believe in a fully funded, equitable, public education system. I believe in affordable and accessible healthcare for all communities. And I believe in economic, criminal, and environmental justice. I believe that every community deserves free air, clean air and water, and deserves opportunity to grow and expand economically. And I believe that good legislation takes those things into account and creates opportunities for those things to happen. I'm Katie Sponsler, and I thank you all for being here tonight, for listening, and I look forward to the forum.
Mike Cherry, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much to ChamberRVA. Thank you for the opportunity to come out and to just talk about some issues tonight and to share a little bit about me, about my thoughts and cares and the directions that I think the 66th district is heading in. A little bit about me. I'm originally from North Carolina. I was born there in Rocky Mount. I lived there until I was 18 years old. I graduated from Roanoke Rapids High School there in North Carolina. Joined the United States Air Force when I was 18 years old. I served as a United States Air Force loadmaster, and that served word will be a common word throughout my biography because I truly want to be a servant to everyone. So I served for 20 years. I transited 6 of the 7 continents and about 75 different countries in my military service. Had an incredible career getting to go and see and do all over the world. And it made me love America all the more. Landed here in Virginia for our final assignment back in 2006. So we've been a resident here in Virginia since 2006. Ran for local office. I'm a sitting city councilman where I serve my community as a city councilman in Colonial Heights now. Also serve as a volunteer police chaplain with the Colonial Heights Police Department. I've been married to my beautiful wife, Teresa, for over 30 years. We've got 2 great kids. My son, Jonathan, is actually in the Air Force now. He's married to Michaela. They've given us the most beautiful granddaughter, Jovi. She'll be 4 on Halloween. I'll be happy to show you as many pictures as you want after we finish and to share that with you. I am now a pastor, is what I do as a full-time job. I'm head of a Christian school, so I'm in education. I am an educator. I understand the challenges that are faced and are facing our kids today in education. I also think we should have safe communities. As a police chaplain, I see the challenges that law enforcement is facing, both through the assault on qualified immunity as well as other aspects. We need to get our businesses back open and get people back to work. And so that's what I'm running for. That's who I am. And thank you for the opportunity tonight, ChamberRVA, Bob, and Kate.
Thank you. First question is for Ms. Sponsor. Glenn Youngkin, Republican candidate for governor's tax plan, includes the following elements: A, eliminating the grocery tax; B, rebating part of the budget surplus to individuals and families; and C, rescinding the power of local governments to adjust property tax revenues upwards unless approved in a public referendum. Can you tell us your reasons for supporting or opposing the income tax proposals?
So I think that it's really important that we understand what it would cost on the whole, what it saves in individual family, what it would cost on the back end of that. So things like a grocery store tax, and believe me, I am somebody who has had to work 3 jobs to pay for grocery bills. That extra tax, yeah, it'd be nice in my pocket, but having to pay more for other services, not being able to utilize or trust my public school system because it had been defunded by processes like that, that would be much more expensive to me. So I don't support that. We do have a balanced budget amendment in Virginia, and it's really important to note that that surplus is because we are not over the hill in this pandemic yet. And we don't know what costs and what emergency circumstances are coming up. And it's making sure that we prepare for that. Because with that balanced budget, we have to make sure that we only spend what we have. So we have it there in case we need it. And that's really important. So I don't think that it's time for a rebate yet. Once we get past this completely, then let's talk about a rebate. In the final part, referendums are very difficult, and with our education funding the way it is, we really can't afford to allow our schools to no longer have that funding unless it's passed. So nobody ever votes yes on a tax. And my red light's up, so.
Mr. Chair, 2 minutes, 90 seconds, excuse me.
Could you please repeat the question for me?
Yeah, sure. Republican candidate for governor's tax plan includes 3 elements: eliminating a grocery tax, B, rebating part of the budget surplus to individuals and families, C, rescinding the power of local governments to adjust property tax revenue upwards unless approved in a public referendum. Please let us know your reasons for supporting or opposing each of these proposals.
Awesome, thank you. I am excited about the probability of Glenn Youngkin being our governor here very shortly. And so I'm very grateful that he's taking the steps that he's taking with his first day plan to get Virginia ready to move forward. The grocery tax is part of that. Everyday working families are struggling. This pandemic has been very, very difficult on so many people. And I think we should take every opportunity we can to get as much money in the pockets of as many people as we can. And the grocery tax is one of those things that hits us all, as well as the fuel tax that people are paying more at the pump every single day. Gas prices are on the rise. Energy prices are on the rise. And so I'm very concerned about the future of Virginians, and particularly those in the 66th district, and how this could positively impact them. Yes, it may not seem like a lot to some, but to some it may mean everything. And so I think it's very important that we do everything we can to return that. So you came to the budget surplus. That was not the government's money. That was the people's money. Because the government doesn't generate revenue, it can only tax and bring in the revenue from the people. So that was the people's money. And I absolutely think that should have been sent back to the people who it came from when it was a surplus and deemed not necessarily necessary for the day-to-day operations of the Commonwealth. And so in terms of the referendum for raising taxes, I will agree with my opponent on that it's very difficult to get referendums through as will. So I'll just let that be what it is.
Okay. For this question to Mr. Cherry first. This year, the General Assembly legalized marijuana and would start retail sales in 2024. Would you A, support any steps to revoke legalization or the retail sale of marijuana? And B, support allowing individuals currently serving jail or prison terms for marijuana violations to be resentenced?
So obviously the General Assembly took the steps last year to legalize marijuana. I don't see that is a cap that can be put back in the bag. So whether you were for it or against it, I'm not for trying to re-legislate that and to take it back to where it was criminalized and or people were put in jail for it. To me, there are other things that are available in our society, such as alcohol, that are more dangerous than marijuana. And so I think we need to go about it judiciously. What I find and what I hear from people is the ham-handed way that it was done. And the idea that it was rushed through to legalization. So there was a plan put in place, full legalization by 24. We would have the legislation, we would have the infrastructure. In essence, what we've done is we've created a bigger black market because we have a product that's legal to possess, but there's no legal way for you to procure it. And so that's my challenge with the way the legalization was done, was this idea that we didn't put all the processes in place. We don't have an infrastructure in place. We don't know where the tax revenue is going. We haven't talked about that. We don't know where that is. And so that's where I'm concerned. In terms of those that are already serving time, I think that absolutely needs to be looked at. As someone who wants to look at criminal justice reform in many different ways, I think we do need to address that as a disparity issue since it is now legal.
Ms. Sponsor, A, support any steps to revoke legalization or the retail sale, or B, support allowing individuals currently serving jail or prison terms for marijuana violations to be resentenced.
So, yeah, I will actually agree with my opponent on the fact that there were some issues with the legislation as it was pushed through. And I think what the wonderful news is that we have some wonderful advocacy groups that have been doing this work for years that do have some solutions to some of those issues. There are some issues about how the retail sales will go through, about the groups and what classifies as a minority, what will be done with the tax revenue. And all those things need to be done in a just and equitable manner. That pays back the communities that were most impacted by the prohibition. In terms of those who are serving time on simple marijuana possession, I would just add one caveat to that, in that we also need to look at those who pled down a possession charge into a paraphernalia charge in order to avoid a automatic felony conviction. So I would just add that we also need to look at some other charges that were plea bargained, and some individuals that may have actually been charged with a simple possession, but were recommended by their lawyers to take it down to avoid automatic felony. So that's a little bit weedy, but I do know some individuals that are facing that. So making sure that we include those individuals in that resentencing and release program.
Ms. Sponsor, question for you. Compared to other jurisdictions like the District of Columbia and the state of Maryland, Virginia is far more restrictive in enabling charter schools to be formed. Do you think that charter schools, that we should loosen the restrictions on charter schools, A, and B, are charter schools, you think, a positive element in trying to improve the overall public education system in Virginia?
So I do not. I believe that charter schools are a separate revenue drain on a system that's already overtaxed and underfunded. So I think why they're tempting is because we have defunded our public schools for so long that we are not allowing them to serve our students. So for parents like me who have children with disabilities, charter schools can be very, very tempting. We know that Virginia is failing its students with disabilities. We know that we have lesser education for children of color, children in communities where with a lower income. And we know that those parents are very frustrated because they are not getting equitable resources. So what we need to do is fully fund our public education system. That is incredibly important. And fully fund means that every child is served in order to thrive. Now, beyond that, I do think that it's important to note that there are other options within choice, and to know the record of charter schools. We know that they are likely to be segregated. We know that children of color and children with disabilities are more likely to face expulsion within those schools and less likely to be accepted within those schools. So we have to understand that these schools can also discriminate against LGBTQIA youth. Making sure that we are funding the public system that has to serve every child is more important than creating another drain on that funding source.
Mr. Cherry, should we loosen restrictions we have on creating charter schools? And what role do you think they play in improving the overall public education system in Virginia?
Well, thank you for that. First, I'll start with, as a city councilman in the city of Colonial Heights, it's incumbent upon me to vote on the school budgets every year. I've always voted to fully fund Colonial Heights schools, whether that was through their operating budget, whether that was through special processes or projects that they were working on. And so I've always I have a track record of fully funding public schools. And yet I look at the public school system today and I wonder, is it working as well as it could? Because it's absolutely possible that you can support something and think perhaps that it could be better for everyone. I do support charter schools, I do support school choice, I do think those are avenues that can create a better educational environment here in Virginia. I think the capitalistic ideals that choice will create a better product because schools have to compete for the dollars. We can look at states that have school choice and they trend to be very good and better than other schools, but it doesn't always have to be public versus private. Massachusetts, that's widely regarded as the #1 public education system, actually has public school choice where students can choose to go to any public school they may want to. So I think we need to get creative. think we need to look at all of the topics and all of the options to give our students the maximum amount of choices to be successful wherever they're at.
Thanks. I'm going to move to a lightning round now, and I'm going to ask both of the candidates a series of questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Cherry. You can either answer yes or no, or if you could keep it to a couple of sentences, that would be great. A, would you support any legislation to prevent individuals from possessing assault-style weapons?
I believe that there are enough gun laws already on the books. I think we need to enforce the gun laws that are there, and once they're fully enforced, then we can look at other options down the road.
Would you support any legislation to weaken or eliminate Virginia's right to work law?
Absolutely not. I think we need to keep the right to work in place. I think it is the model that supports business. Obviously, we're at the chamber, and I think it is the model that works best for a strong business economy. Virginia's ranked #1 in business. Why would we want to change the things that made us #1?
Would you support retaining a chief diversity officer as a gubernatorial cabinet appointment?
I wouldn't have an issue with that at all. I think that would be something that the governor should weigh in on whether he thinks that's part of his cabinet.
Did you support Governor Northam's decision to take the Robert E. Lee Monument down?
To be honest, I don't have much of an opinion about the statues one way or the other. Put them in a museum, take them off Monument Avenue. It's not something that's impactful to the 66th district, which is who I'm trying to represent. And so I want to try to let the communities that surround those statues and things make those decisions as best for them.
Virginia and maybe even Richmond are putting up a lot of casinos. Do you think these are effective modes of economic development?
Not from what I have studied, but it is another issue that I would want to garner more information on before I gave a yes or no, up or down answer on that.
Do you support ending qualified immunity for police officers?
Not in any way, shape, or form. Our communities are less safe if officers have to worry about being able to do their job and be protected. It's qualified immunity for a reason. It's not a blanket immunity that they can go and break laws. If they break laws, they're held accountable. And so we absolutely need to protect our communities. We do that through safe communities and by protecting our law enforcement officers and protecting them in every way, shape, or form we can.
Thanks, Ms. Sponsor. I'm going to take you through the same set of questions. Would you support any legislation to prevent individuals from possessing assault-style weapons?
I think it depends on the definition of assault style. I think we need to look very closely. They were defined in the law. And if it was similar to the Clinton era law, I think it needs a few tweaks. But yes, I do believe that certain weapons should be limited for personal use and restricted moderately. There's always a higher level license that's available.
Would you support any legislation to weaken or eliminate Virginia's right to work law?
I do. We have a long history of evidence that right to work laws were racist in their origin and continue to impact in that manner. We also know that states without them have a higher average pay for workers, as well as safer and more equitable working conditions and more sustainable industries.
Would you support retaining a chief diversity officer as a gubernatorial cabinet appointment?
Absolutely. I think it's an important point to have voices at the table.
Do you support Governor Northam's decision to take down the Robert E. Lee Monument?
I do. I think that even though overall as a community we don't have large monuments in the 66, we do have people who are impacted by the knowledge and the history that they display.
Do you think that casinos are an effective mode of economic development for the Commonwealth of Virginia?
I do not. They cost more in what we require as a community to sustain them, and typically those jobs are not even locally held.
Do you support ending qualified immunity for police officers?
I support a moratorium on it temporarily until we have better laws. Right now we have laws that will protect officers in the interim. I served as a law enforcement officer. ARM could potentially need and require qualified immunity. What I know is that our legal system actually protects those actions in a number of other ways, and qualified immunity is frequently abused. So until we have competent judicial reform that ensures it will not be abused, I think that we need to make sure that our communities are safe.
Ms. Sponsor, let me now start the next round of questions. I go to you first on this. And I'm going to go to a comment that you made in your opening statement where you talked about your support for environmentalism. And Governor Northam and the legislature last year passed the Virginia Clean Economy Act, calling for net carbon emissions down to 0 by 2050. Candidate McAuliffe would like to move that up to 2035. Do you support the Clean Economy Act and Governor McAuliffe and former Governor McAuliffe's pledge to try to reduce 0 carbon emissions down to 2035?
I do. I think that it's a big idea and it's kind of scary for us, but I think it's scarier for my 22-year-old daughter to know the climate crisis that is approaching. We know that we've already seen climate refugees due to it. We know that we are seeing a number of other economic impacts, not to mention wildfires and extreme weather, and then flooding here in the 66. I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that we must act quickly on these issues, but also that carbon emissions cause a number of issues that affect us every day, like the high asthma rates here in Richmond and in the 66 district. Too many of our children are sick. I grew up in a town where nobody thought it was a big deal to have 3-4 family members dying of cancer at the same time. We didn't realize that was abnormal. I didn't until I left. Here, I talk to people every day on the doors that don't realize that all 4 of their grandbabies having asthma is unusual. But that is what we deal with. I know 4 people with sarcoidosis in Midlothian. That is a rare disorder. We have to improve our water and air quality any way we can because we are sick because of it. And it costs us more money in healthcare costs, and it costs us more money in education costs because our children are not able to attend school frequently. So I do think it's really important that we move that forward. And if the companies are going to do it themselves, would have already done it.
Okay, Mr. Cherry, the Clean Economy Act and former Governor McAuliffe's pledge to reduce carbon emissions, net carbon emissions to 0 by 2035.
So a little bit about me. I'm an outdoorsman. I love to be outside. I love to hunt and fish and to enjoy the environment. And so you won't find anyone who wants to protect it more than me. I am concerned about the Virginia Green New Deal and these other policies that are being implemented and put into place. Studies are telling us that they're going to cost Virginians more money. And so we look at real dollars and impacts to our communities. And I'm very concerned that these may not be the answers. But I think we need an all approach to energy. I think we need an all approach to how we do everything here, whether it's keeping clean water, keeping clean air. We can't get rid of all of our fossil fuel technologies. That's gotten so much cleaner. Our coal plants have gotten so much cleaner, our natural gas. But you got to also look at the impacts of our community. And so if we were to shut off natural gas, which is one of the things that's been proposed here in Richmond, many of the property values in Richmond are going to plummet because houses will have to be retrofitted to use another heating source. And so you got to just not look at just the environmental concerns, but the entire overall impact of how this legislation could hurt Virginians, as well as how much it's going to cost and where that money is going to come from.
Okay, thanks. Next question, start with Mr. Cherry. The Supreme Court is hearing a case this term which the state of Mississippi is requesting that Roe v. Wade be overturned. The Supreme Court agrees with Mississippi. Virginia is going to have to decide what its laws are. Would you support incorporating the principles of Roe v. Wade in the Virginia Constitution? In addition, what, if any, changes would you support to Virginia's current abortion laws?
So it's probably no shocker that as a pastor, I would be pro-life. That's probably got to be the most moment of the evening, that I think life should be protected and that I think that's very, very valuable. Roe versus Wade is settled law. I don't think that is something that's going to be re-legislated in Virginia. There are laws that have been put up. You look at the Texas law, I think that goes too far. But there's also laws here in Virginia that have gone too far the other way. When you have Kathy Tran advocating in a bill that literally at the moment of birth a child could be terminated. And so I think we've got to come to a place where we can meet in the middle, where we can be where most of Virginians are, which is no late-term abortions. And so I think the laws in Virginia, they are what they are. I'm not trying to re-legislate them from that, certainly not trying to get rid of Roe versus Wade. But I think we definitely need to come to a place where all Virginians can meet, where we can find common ground, and where we can meet the needs of Virginia.
Ms. Sponsor, would you support incorporating Roe v. Wade in the Virginia Constitution? What, if any, changes would you support to current abortion laws?
I do. Roe is a simple decision based on the 14th Amendment's protection of privacy and saying that that privacy extends to pregnant persons. Imagine that, we're still human and still get that right. So I do believe that. I do believe that Kathy Tran's bill, which was brought up, I just want to specify a little personal story here, and that's what I'm going to use this time for, because I do think it's incredibly important. In 2015, I was pregnant with my son. My son had a single artery umbilical. It's a very common birth defect. What it does do, though, however, is increase the potential of kidney and heart malformation by about 50% and increase the chance of stillbirth by 20%. Unfortunately, I have a chronic illness, which makes my immune system work very poorly. Meaning that should I have my child abort, it failed to self-abort even though he was stillborn and he had died, I could not seek treatment as I was being treated on federal dollars through VA healthcare. I could not seek abortive care, which is what that would be. A dead fetus being removed by body would be qualified as abortive care. Under the trap laws that Kathy Tran's bill repealed, I would have to seek the input of 3 doctors and then pay out of pocket for that abortive care. Late-term abortive care. There were at the time 2 facilities in Virginia that provided that. Both are incredibly expensive. My life would have been on the line and my doctor would not have been able to save it. He had to suggest to me, happily pregnant at 20 weeks, that I have an emergency backup plan. 3 doctors on call and money set aside. This is what things like the trap repeal did. It protects women from those heartbreaking decisions being made for them by legislators.
Thanks. Next question for the sponsor first. Do you support vaccine mandates for teachers and for healthcare workers who interact with patients?
I think we are at a point, unfortunately, due to some individuals' decision to spread misinformation, that we need to make sure that those who serve our community and do so constantly. My son goes to school right now face to face. I hope his teacher is vaccinated. I want to go to a medical facility where I know that the people there believe in medical science. And I think it's incredibly important that we acknowledge that. As someone who has served their entire life, I can tell you the number of vaccines I have received without my input and would have easily lost my job for it. 2 separate experimental anthrax ones. Highly unlikely to get anthrax, but still 2 separate ones. Both were later recalled. I have received Hep A, Hep B, multiple typhoid vaccines, you name it. All in order to keep my job. And I have never felt that it was something unfair to ask of me because I was protecting my community and those I served with. And I was happy to do so. So right now, making sure that our community is safe, knowing that the vaccine is our best shot of moving past this without further mutations that we are unable to protect ourselves with are incredibly important. And I agree that we should be mandating it because that's the choice we're left with.
And Mr. Chair, 90 seconds, vaccine mandates for teachers and healthcare workers who interact with patients.
First off, I don't think anyone's going to argue that COVID-19 isn't a very serious disease. My wife and I both contacted COVID last year, and thankfully, gratefully, we were able to recover from that. And we know the seriousness of it and how important it is. When it comes to mandates, I think we need to be very careful about what we're making people do in order to continue to participate in society, continue to participate in what's a part of going on. I just think I'm very hesitant to mandate. I believe in the vaccine. I believe in the shot. I believe in everyone who wants to get it, absolutely needs to get it. But I think those are decisions that should be made between an individual and their healthcare provider. Because I think that's where that decision is rightly made, as an individual basis. Ms. Sponsor, you noted in the last answer that you believed in the individual right. And so here's another place where let's go to the individual right and the individual right of that person to do what's best for them and for their healthcare with the advice and consent of their healthcare provider.
Okay, final question before we go to closing statements, and this starts with Mr. Cherry. We've known that a number of people have lost their jobs through the COVID pandemic, and at the same time, employers are telling us today that they can't find enough workers, and that this situation, which has been going on for some time, has really been exacerbated by the pandemic. What steps should the Assembly take to support the private sector in workforce development and workforce supply efforts?
Great question, and it comes back to one of the pillars of my platform, which is education. I think we need an education system that's robust to prepare people for the job force. A few years ago, I was invited to attend the Virginia Secondary School Principals Conference. At that conference, the leader of that organization stood up in front of an entire room full of principals from high schools and middle schools across the Commonwealth of Virginia, and very plainly said, we are not producing a product that the workforce can use. Here's the gentleman who's running the organization telling us the schools are not preparing students to go out and get a job. And so we need to bring trade schools back. We need to have programs and processes in place. Every child doesn't necessarily need a four-year degree. And so we need to prepare students. We need to prepare people. We need to prepare adults through our education system, through technical training, to work in those jobs. We need to prepare them for the jobs that are available. How many people have a degree in something that is not a viable option for a career? And so teaching them to do things that we need, whether that's HVAC, plumbing, whether that's computers, whether that's technology. There's so many jobs that are available, but I think our education system is failing them in preparation for those jobs that are available.
Ms. Sponsor?
Certainly. So I'm going to address the immediate need first. So I think what's important to note about this labor shortage is where it's at. It's most frequently in those jobs that women are more likely to possess: in healthcare, in education, in hospitality. We see this, and we knew it was probably coming because about 6 months ago, we learned a new term. They called it the she session, because so many women have been driven out of the workforce by COVID. Now, moms, and I've talked to a number of employers who tell me this, moms are who is not coming back. I left my own job. I'd finally gotten back to work. I was so excited. And I was working in hospitality management. And I left it because I had to stay at home with my son. So what we need to be able to do is know that our children are going to be in school reliably, which means safety protocols being followed at our schools and our schools being fully funded so that we can keep them there and they're not constantly in and out of quarantine. We need to provide paid sick leave and family medical leave for women who are more likely to be caretakers and have to leave the workforce. So I think that is the immediate need. In terms of education, I don't believe that education is about preparing a job force. I believe education is that preparing human beings for life, whatever that looks like to them. And I think it's really important to note that critical thinking skills I am getting the red light, so but that is what I think could be done immediately.
Great, thank you. Closing statements, and Ms. Sponsor, we start with you for 2 minutes.
Absolutely. So thank you all so much for being out here. I know that frequently I disagree with folks. And I think that what is important is that we build coalitions that disagree with us, that we are not constantly in an echo chamber. Tonight, the group that I brought with me represents the entire big giant tent that I am so happy to be under as a Democrat. There are those who are to the left of me, and those are to the right of me. And I think it's very important that I hear those voices and they are part of my coalition. And one of the reasons is because I think that's how we build better legislation. It is where we compromise, where we know what happened, what needs to happen. And I think that frequently, what I find is it doesn't matter what the details are. The values at the root are the same. And my values are to protect and serve my community. And my community is diverse. It is amazing. It is strong, and it has had to work way too darn long for a long time. Their backs are sore, and so are their feet. And they deserve a voice that is willing to hear them, and listen to them, and to act with those values that we share. And that is what I want to do. Now, the details, some of them I'll figure out as I go, because I need to hear from people who are most impacted by those policies. But the values won't change. And I hope if you're listening to this recording, or if you're out in the audience tonight, you know that about me. And that's what you got from me. That this is me, integrally, value grounded, and service oriented. And that is genuinely who I am. Thank you all so much.
Mr. Cherry, 2 minutes.
I'd like to start with a few thank yous. Number one, to my wife, who has been willing to put up with this for the last year. To my daughter, who I forgot to mention a while ago in my opening statement. I got excited about my grandbaby. It happens. And so thank you for coming tonight. To my team that's been so integral in putting this together and working so hard, to friends that have been supported, like Sheriff Carl Leonard and others that have come out to be here and to help. I'm so grateful to have it, because you can't do this by yourself. You've got to have a team of people. And so I'm so grateful for that and thankful. You know, obviously, I think you've seen tonight that there are some big disparities between the two candidates and the way forward for Virginia. I think educational choice is something that we need. I think our schools on many levels are failing us. I think we need to look at revamping them and trying to get to where they are more responsive, where they are more reactive, where they are preparing students for the real world. I think we need safe communities, and I think that's done through proper funding of our police departments. Hold them accountable, absolutely, to the standards. But we need to properly fund them. Virginia State Police is down almost 400 police officers right now. I don't think that makes our community safer when we have less officers on the street, when we take away their protections and qualified immunity. Finally, our economy is in trouble. It is struggling. We've talked jobs tonight. We've talked taxes tonight. We've talked processes to get people back to work and to make them be successful. So those are all kind of different directions that Mrs. Sponsor and I want to take the Commonwealth of Virginia in, with the help of the legislature in Richmond. So I'm Mike Cherry, delegate candidate for the 66th district. I'm a pastor, an educator of a minority majority school, a police chaplain, a father, I'm a servant. That's what I want to do, is I want to serve my community. And right now I feel like I've been called to the House of Delegates to serve as the delegate from the 66th district. So thank you again, ChamberRVA. Thank you for all of you who've come out. Those of you that have joined us online or will in recording. John, thank you for putting this together. Bob, thank you for having us out tonight, being such an incredible moderator. Thank you so much for the time.
Please thank our